Okay, welcome to the Places Medicine podcast. This is where you can learn all about how you can make your home, your building, your neighborhood healthy for you and healthy for your family. And this podcast here with Ron is a long time coming. He is an expert in all things water and making sure you have clean water for you, your family, for your bath, for your shower, for drinking. And I've gotten to know Ron through my day job at Jamestown LP, where we're a real estate company. And we're in the process of installing one of Ron's full building water filters in one of our buildings. And so it's just been a delight getting to know him and learning about this entire space. So welcome, Ron. I'm really excited that you're here. And why don't you do a little brief intro?
Sure. Thank you, Carrie. I'm really excited to be here. It's true. I think if we recorded any of the conversations we've had in the past, it would have been a few podcast episodes, not just one. And I think that you and I, we share a lot of passion towards healthy buildings. And this is something that we're also in real estate outside of our water company. And healthy buildings is something that I really, really care about. It's something that you're starting to see a lot more people care about. So this kind of podcast, it's totally the right podcast in the right time. And I'm really happy to be here. So just a little bit about what we do. So I'm the CEO of Clear and the founder. And Clear itself, it's a water technology company. And we're really focused on providing improved water quality to all levels of society. And we're focusing really on providing centralized solutions, things that are affordable and effective to large groups of people at the same time, large communities. So we do centralized whole building water purification systems. As you mentioned, we're doing one installation for Jamestown now, and that we're very, very excited about. We're relatively a young company at this point. We've only been around for about 3-4 years. And we take a very different approach than any traditional filter company. And that really comes down from my background in science. So I was a biologist before this. I was doing my PhD. And I was really focused actually on longevity. And recently I just joined on the board of the Longevity Science Foundation to actually push the concept of healthy buildings and how important that is to longevity.
That's
right?
great.
Yeah, because we talk about the genetics, we talk about the things that we eat, and we talk about the pharmaceutical ways that we can actually try to improve our longevity. But from what I went through, and we'll go into that a little bit, I first started with the theory of how do we find pharmaceuticals that can help us to live longer, help us to prevent cancers, help us to fight off disease. But one of the major things that I learned was that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of the cure. So for me, it became, how can we prevent the kinds of illnesses, diseases, and issues that we get throughout our life? And it's not just by having a pill at the end of the day. It's actually about how do we improve the environmental quality, the environmental health of where we live, where we spend 90% of our time. It starts as obviously as air quality, as we all learned during COVID. But then water quality is an absolutely essential one that's taken quite for granted at this point, but that's changing.
Mm-hmm. No, it's so true, I think. And that's the entire reason for having the place as medicine concept. Just as we talk about food as medicine, we need to talk about place. And we too often forget that you have to have, the environment, the shell, the home you're in be this place that's nurturing and not something that's going to set you back. So your story and how you got into this is remarkable, and maybe in a negative way too, but tell us a little bit about how you moved from a PhD in longevity into a water technology company.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that I never expected could have happened to me in my life. And I was doing my PhD. I was halfway through the process. I was about 25 years old at the time. And I went traveling with a girlfriend at the time, and we stayed at an Airbnb. And we know generally when you travel, you don't drink the water through the taps, right? That's generally what people understand. But when you see next to the tap, there's a filtered line, one of those sort of thin faucets, and you assume that, hey, that I'm allowed to drink from, then you go ahead. And I had one cup of water from that faucet. I ended up contracting a parasite that kills almost 100,000 people globally every single year. This parasite is called Entamoeba histolytica. It's a single cellular parasite. It's something that the moment I came home to Canada, so I live in Toronto, the moment I came home to Canada with
And where were you? This was Cyprus,
This was in
right?
Cyprus, yeah. So
okay.
This is in the Mediterranean, but it wasn't like, in a third world country. I mean, Cyprus is a very developed place. And it just came out of nowhere. It was one bad cup of water. And so for me, coming home with this parasite and the after effects, what happened to me after I got this infection, it was shocking. It was shocking to me that a 25-year-old kid that never had any issues with his stomach and no gastrointestinal symptoms in his life, one bad cup of water, and now for 3 years, I was experiencing some devastating symptoms. I took health leave for my PhD. I lost like 100 pounds in an 8-month period.
Which is crazy because...
No, I was 230 pounds. I dropped to 130 pounds. I'm almost a 6-foot guy with broad shoulders. I mean, it's not something that I did not look good at the bottom there. And I had to learn how to cook. I had to work with a dietitian just to try to find foods that didn't hurt at the end of the day. And that lasted me like 3 years before I really started to get better. So during that time, as a scientist, I'm asking myself, how is it possible, right? Like, what is it that's in our water that could possibly be causing that kind of effect on my life, and really at the prime of my life too? So I started to do the research like a scientist should, and I started to read about what are the microbiological risks in our water, generally what are the risks in our water, how do we treat it, how does the government create guidelines towards it, how do they manage it? What I learned was that it's not really, as we expect, water quality issues in maybe developing countries, but even in developed countries, even in our urban centers, even in the buildings that we all live in and work in, there are some significant risks that are really hard to manage. And what I saw in terms of what we're doing to currently manage these risks, I was not impressed with. I was not happy with the government guidelines. I was not happy with how people approach the water quality management. And I think a big part of it comes from a lack of incentives to really make sure that the water quality is not harming people.
So talk to me, paint a little bit of the picture of what the current water situation looks like, and maybe give a couple examples. The one really compelling one I remember you gave me was about water in New York and looking at one of the water towers and what you saw there. But maybe just give a couple vignettes of what is the current state of water purity, maybe in New York or Florida, high income, low income, Canada, just a couple examples.
Yeah, and maybe starting out with what we hear a lot, which is the general expectation is that you're in New York, you're in Toronto, like water quality should be pretty good. Coming from the city, it's being treated in a municipal treatment plant. What's coming to your taps generally should be safe and generally should be okay for you. And that's generally what people say. That is starting to change as individual consumers are starting to be able to test the water that's actually coming to their taps. They're able to test cheaper. They're able to test more and more things in their water. And they're realizing that, you know what, coming to my tap is what I care about. And the truth is that between the water treatment plant and your tap, the source to the tap, there's actually a lot of areas in which contaminants and other types of risks can enter the water system. And at that point, the government has sort of washed its hands, so to speak, with what those risks would be. So one of the major points is that during the distribution systems, right, the water leaves the water treatment plant and it travels through miles and miles and miles of these pipes. Some of those pipes have been laid there almost 100 years ago. I mean, you got places like Philadelphia and New Orleans whose pipes were laid there during the Civil War.
That's crazy.
Okay, so yeah, Biden will go out and he'll put a huge multi-$100 billion plan to actually start over 40 years to change those pipes. But it's an uphill battle because the moment you change those pipes at a huge cost and taking a lot of time, now the other pipes that were already laid are now getting old and getting older. So it's a constant uphill battle. What happens is that those pipes...
And it's not just the pipes in the ground, it's the one going to the building itself too, or the homeowner.
So, and that would be the step after it gets to the building. But just focusing on the pipes from the city, I mean, those are broken. I mean, any plumber that's worked on those pipes before, they know what they look like, right? They're porous, they're broken, they're cracked. And whenever there's what's called a low flow or low pressure event, then now all of a sudden everything from the outside of those pipes start to get sucked into those pipes. And that usually happens during different weather events. Let's say there's a snow melt here in New York and it increases the water table above those pipes. It can actually reverse the flow into those pipes. And now everything that's out there on the street is coming into the pipes that are basically now going into your sink and your showers. But let's say even if it gets through the pipes perfectly, with no issues, no contaminants, then in the building itself, especially in a place like New York where the buildings are actually quite old, there's many types of bacteria, many types of pathogens that have learned to grow inside of our buildings' plumbing systems. So New York is actually definitely leading the way in the US in terms of regulations related to managing a bacteria in our water called Legionella. Legionella there is a huge problem that grows inside of the plumbing, inside of our buildings. It creates these biofilms and lives within those biofilms, and it's like immune to the disinfectants, like the chlorine and everything coming in. And especially for older buildings and in the right situation, that Legionella will start to grow exponentially and start to release itself. And it's actually, Legionella is interesting because it's not something you drink. It's something that when you breathe it in. So it's actually going to be in the showers that people are more likely to get affected by Legionella. I did not
know that.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Again, it's one of the major things I've learned is that there's a big gap between what we know in the water quality issues and what people know, what consumers are understanding about it. So they hear bacteria in the water, they're afraid to drink it, but when you get into the shower and there's a bit of a musty smell, right? That could actually be representative of bacteria like Legionella or others like Pseudomonas, which are going through the vapors. And as you breathe it in, it can actually infect the lungs and create pneumonias. And it can actually be extremely deadly. Something like Legionella, when it infects your lungs and you get something called Legionnaire's disease, it has a 25% case fatality rate. It's extremely deadly. And especially for people who are immunocompromised, for seniors. I mean, seniors die all the time from pneumonia. How often are people checking to see if it was an issue like Legionella? So you got here in New York, like in the Bronx in 2015, it was like hundreds of people got infected Legionella from a single source. And actually in that case, it was a cooling tower that was releasing the mist and the Legionella onto the streets below. So the people were just walking past the building getting infected. This is the part where once New York saw this and experienced this, there was a huge push to increase the regulations, force buildings to test. If they see issues with Legionella, they have to deal with it and until they test again, until it's cleared. And New York is really one of the first cities, I think the only city right now that has those kinds of regulations for their cooling towers. In Canada, we have Vancouver and Quebec, but even Toronto doesn't have it yet.
Interesting.
So, and one of the major things to know is that Legionella and the risks and the actual, how often it happens, it's been growing tremendously, like exponentially, 10 times in the past, 10 years. And that's across the board, not just New York. That's across the board, even in Europe and Canada. And people and scientists are still trying to understand why. But the point is that it's a risk that grows inside of our buildings, affecting our health, affecting our longevity. And we have to see it. We have to understand what it is, and we have to deal with it.
And so when you talk, Legionella is one piece of it, but there's obviously a lot of different things that are potential negative things in our water system. So could you help paint the picture on that? There's Legionella. There's obviously lead. People hear a lot about lead. And I think I really want you to pull out one of the stories from you about lead contamination you saw in some high-rise buildings you've worked in. But there's lead. Now there's a lot of concern around forever chemicals and those being in the water.
Yeah.
So can you just paint the picture of all the various things that could be lurking in our water?
I'm going to start with saying that once you start to test, you start to see the problems. And lead is one of many heavy metals, but a very common one because a lot of pipes that were laid early had lead in them. The removal of lead in our plumbing system was legislated back in the 90s, and yet there's still all these older buildings that have lead components to them. Places like Florida are the most leaded states in the country, and so when we go,
why is that?
I think it's just because of a lack of interest to actually replace and to incentivize the replacement of all the lead plumbing fixtures, but there's also something to be said about people not following the legislation, finding cheaper plumbing fixtures that still may contain lead in it, and installing those. So you were referring to a story that I saw. I was in actually Boca Raton, which is in Florida, and it was a totally new building. The building had finished. It was a beautiful condo building. It finished about 2 years before this point, so it's relatively new. And we were called in by contractors because all of a sudden the piping started to corrode and they didn't know why, and they were getting blamed by the developer. And so they said, hey, Clear, come in, please test the water. There's got to be an issue with the water quality causing the corrosion. It's not our fault as the plumbers. said, fine, no problem.
Was your filter installed
No.
in that building, or you were just brought in as
we
an
had a
outsider?
relationship with the contractors, and they needed help to understand why there was so much corrosion in the plumbing they put down not 2 years ago. Okay, so when we came, we tested, and what we found is actually they had an iron-related bacteria that was creating these biofilms that caused these deposits to form and basically gunk up all of the different valves, the pressure release valves, and all the different fixtures throughout the building. And underneath the deposits, you had a corrosion occurring. This is under deposit corrosion, it's called. So I have a picture where you actually remove the deposit from these PRVs, and you see that the metal was eaten away at. So it's actually it started from a bacterial problem. And when we did the test and we confirmed that this was the case, part of our test also tested for lead and other types of metals as well. So we saw sort of not what we were looking for, but to the side what we saw was an immense amount of lead entering the building. And when I say immense, I mean, Flint, Michigan, the whole story there with the amount of lead coming through, that was hitting the federal action limit of the amount of lead. The amount of lead we saw in this building was double the amount that was the issue in Flint, Michigan. Lead, so people understand, can cause early termination of pregnancies. It can cause developmental delays in children and developmental defects. And so it's a huge amount of lead coming in through this building. And I'm really concerned. And specifically what we saw was it was coming from the pumps, not from the city. So we tested along the way between when the city was entering to all the way to the taps. And we saw it was after the pumps, but not before it, suggesting that the pump itself may have had lead in it. And who installed the pump? Well, it was the contractors, right? So now we put in a report, hey, we found the issue of your corrosion, but by the way, there's a huge amount of lead. Please deal with it. I gave it to the contractors who brought us in to do this report, and the contractors had asked us to remove the part with the lead. Why? Because it's a liability for them. Now, obviously worse than the crime is the cover-up, so I refused to remove it from the report, and so the report never made it to the building through the contractors. I went around, called the building a million times, made sure they understood what the risks were, but I never saw those contractors again.
So you don't know what actually happened? Are people in that building still?
I made sure to get on the phone with the property manager, which was difficult. I had to call many, many times.
Yeah.
But I couldn't sleep at night knowing that this amount of lead was coming into this building and potentially nobody was doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So by the time I got them on the phone, I said, hey, listen, I'm not trying to sell you anything, right? You just have a ton of lead coming in. I think it's coming from your pumps. Just go and investigate, go and do more tests and figure out if it is, double check. And if it is, replace the pump, right? Because somebody gave you a pump that, per the law back in the 90s, is illegal to source. And this is the reason why. So that is just one of the stories that I have where when you test and you see problems, those problems are extremely inconvenient to a lot of different stakeholders. Whether it's inconvenient to a contractor that potentially installed the issue, or maybe even to a property manager that doesn't want to deal directly with any specific problems, and now they have to spend money and time and effort and focus when they have so many other things to deal with. They're not incentivized to deal if they find PFAS in your water. They're not incentivized to deal if they find lead, and even all the way up to government officials. We've had immense problems, which I can get into, with government officials who don't want to release and to show other people what may be an issue coming from the city because they don't know how to deal with it. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't know how to deal with it.
Well, no one wants to be on the hook. No one wants to be sued because of something like this. So that's, presumably the rationale there.
Yeah.
So in addition to lead, you touched on PFAS, but talk a little bit about, we talked about bacteria, we talked about lead. Talk a little bit about PFAS in the water and what PFAS are for people listening, watching.
Yeah. So PFAS, it represents a class of different compounds, and there's many different types. And it's basically these chemicals that just they're not removed from the water, right? They're known as these forever chemicals, right? And they've been associated to cancers and excess risk of lifetime cancer. So PFAS is definitely an issue, and it's especially an issue in our wastewater, where it starts to increase in concentration and eventually gets back into our source water. So there's a lot of regulations about managing PFAS in wastewater, but I don't see enough focus on managing PFAS in the actual water that we drink. And so that's one of those things where there is an increased understanding of it and an increased demand to try to deal with it. But those tests, for instance, for PFAS are a bit more expensive. Managing PFAS, understanding that there's so many different types, becomes actually quite complicated. So you might be able to find a solution for some PFAS, but not for all of them. So those are issues that you see actually throughout the nation at this point. So there is a big push to try to manage the issues related to PFAS. But between the heavy metals like lead, between PFAS, between what I think is taken a bit more for granted, the microbiological, what we're starting to realize, I think as a society, I think we're starting to see that there's more and more problems than we've taken for granted. And actually what we consume every day in terms of our water, it matters to deal with it. I mean, it's affecting our health. Cancer rates continue to go up in many different types of cancers. Chronic diseases continue to crop up, and we still don't know where they're coming from. And, you know, people point to our highly processed foods here in the West. And yeah, I mean, I think that has a big part to do with it. But I also think that the water you drink every single day is a massive component of that.
Yeah, I think, you know, people I have on, there's multiple different things we talk about. It could be lighting, it could be mold, it could be water. And I think all of these things play a role and have to be considered. And they, you know, environmental factors often aren't, but there's also no reason why we should have bad water. You know, there's no reason for it. So many of us, you know, fix the situation with plastic bottled water, which has its own bad implications of single-use plastics and also
the microplastics
as well. So you have that situation. You have people with the pitchers, which we'll talk about that, or their own filters. But then I think one of the real light bulb moments for me was it's not just about water quality in your tap, but it's water quality that you're bathing in or that you're showering in, and you bring it up with Legionella. But people don't think, they think, oh, the tap filter I have is great, but they're not thinking about the whole picture at all. So having people like you and talking about this in general, I think is so critical. But so we've talked about the problems. Talk a little bit about what you've done with Clear and the solution there and how you got to that.
Yeah. What we're looking for something that it's not just an under the sink, you deal with one sink. It's not just a shower head, you deal with one shower. I mean, we're trying to find an effective and comprehensive solution for entire communities, every sink, every shower. And that comes at creating, it's part of a philosophy known as the multi-barrier approach to water quality management. Basically, between the source and the tap, there's multiple areas that we need to be treating our water. And there's different stakeholders that need to be actually managing the water at those points. So obviously from the municipal treatment plant, that's the city's responsibility. There's lots of different technologies that they deploy, and different cities will deploy different technologies. But then after the distribution pipes, it needs to have another barrier. That barrier should come at the point of entry to a whole building, right? And that should be something that the property owners and the property managers are managing. So that's the point that we're really focused on, because that's the point where we feel that it's been very neglected. So we have consumers that, you know, they'll drink out of a pitcher, a Brita pitcher, or they'll have an under the sink filter, and that's pretty normal. And at this point, 77% of Americans rely on some form of filtration like that, which shows, by the way, that people are willing to pay to improve their water quality. But now the question is, you know, are they doing enough? Would they satisfy themselves if they tested the water after their pitcher, after they're under the sink? Are they doing enough for their showers? Are they doing enough for the sink? What about the fountains in the gym? So at the end of the day, to put a single system that's centralized for a whole building should be more cost effective to every single consumer living in that building. The problem was that the traditional filters, like what we would put under the sink, examples would be like an RO system is very popular. If you want to put an RO system...
Reverse osmosis system. Quickly explain what a reverse osmosis system is, just so people know.
The reverse osmosis system, it's a really tight membrane that nothing can pass except for the water. I mean, it catches basically everything, including the salts, which is not good because when you get deionized water, it's not good for your health. So now you need to remineralize the water afterwards. But it's basically a very, very tight membrane, and it captures absolutely everything onto that membrane. There's a few different problems with RO systems, including the low flow that a lot of consumers complain about, and the waste of water. So for every liter of water you drink that's purified by RO, you've actually thrown away between 3 or 4 liters into the drain. But Those systems, you can buy like a nice one, maybe $2,000, $3,000 and protect one sink. But if you want to build that for a whole building at the point of entry, big RO system, you're going to need to build a factory to the side of the building. It doesn't scale to that size of flow, to that size of pipe. So what that means is that RO systems are just not cost effective. They have too big of a footprint.
They don't scale.
To the larger communities. So the RO systems didn't really work. The other concepts were things like media filters, carbon filters. Those are some of the materials that you'll find in a Brita pitcher, or some other types of under the sink filters. You'll see the carbon and the different types of media. And those as well, for larger and larger buildings, you're going to need to put bigger and bigger tanks. So we saw some examples where, a 300 unit hotel was getting yellow water and needed to install these media filters coming in to clean the water. And those filters were like 9-foot cylinders, 6 of them, taking up the whole room. They had to break a wall.
Not a good use.
No, again, it doesn't scale very well.
Yeah.
And it's extremely expensive and it's very difficult to maintain. But the concept of having a whole building water quality solution that is something that's a single point of installation, single point of service, there is an economies of scale for something that we can put there to improve water quality for the whole building. And we found the right technology for that. And that technology was actually ultraviolet. So UV is something that's been disinfecting our water, managing microbiological risks, but other types of issues in our water as well. And we've been using it for more than 100 years. So UV is actually very effective. It's a very healthy way to disinfect the water, much healthier than injecting more chlorine, for instance. And it actually can be used as an alternative to chlorine in many cases. So you'll find lots of pools, for instance, with reduced chlorine that are relying on UV to keep them clean. And that means that when you go into that pool, you're not coming out with potentially chemical burns or just generally all the issues that come with chlorine on the skin, on the hair, and everything like that. So instead, a big UV system, if we can provide it into the point of entry to a building, then we can basically sterilize, disinfect all the water that's coming into the building. Any type of contaminants that came in through the city distribution would basically be completely removed. So what we did at Clear was we found a technology that was already being used for more than 20 years inside of our favorite water bottles. So Nestle, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Fiji, they all use this exact same system to disinfect, purify our water before it's bottled. So every time you open a bottle of water of Fiji and you trust that there's no bacteria inside of it, you're already trusting this exact same technology to accomplish that.
And so you guys essentially licensed it for commercial real estate use, or?
That's exactly right.
How long did it take you to find this technology? Was this like months of years of research and digging, and meanwhile you're recovering from being sick and you're dropping out of your PhD? Like, what was this whole process?
It's a big process, but at the end of the day, there weren't that many UV manufacturers out there, right? So you visit every single factory, you learn about what makes this technology different than that technology, and you find the one that's the best able to translate into real estate, which is where our background was in, which is what we were focused on, healthy buildings.
Yeah, and bring real value to the tenants.
Exactly. So we went into every single factory, we learned about every single UV product that's out there, and we found one that is actually the best to translate into high rises in a way that none of the other ones could even start to do. Mostly related to the fact that it had many different sensors that you can monitor. And the whole concept here was not just to provide the best technology, because it's not enough to just drop the best filter on somebody and then leave them with that. If you want to wake up every morning trusting that the water is coming in is being treated properly, you need to know that it's not just the technologies that's there, it's that somebody is actually watching it, taking care of it, servicing it, and making sure it's always functioning above a specific guarantee, like a performance guarantee.
Yeah, it's like not cleaning the Brita filter, not replacing it. You want to make sure the person in the building is actually doing that for the whole building.
It's like my friend with a Brita filter that he's had for 12 months and hasn't changed the filter. It's not only is it not doing what he thinks it's doing, but now it's actually probably creating more problems, right? Bacteria has probably already started to grow on those filters, as an example. So what that means is that we had to find a technology that also permitted us to provide that full service model. And that's, I think, one of the major things that makes us very unique compared to any traditional filter company. You have no clue how many homes we've gone to in Florida where people have been given filters and they don't know how to take care of it. And the filters have been sitting there for years. When we come to do the test, we see huge amounts of bacteria coming out of those filters. We see that they're not even removing the things they're supposed to be removing anymore. And actually, people are paying for filters and making their water worse. So it requires a lot more care and a lot more on the service aspect as well. And this is what our tagline is all about: water you can trust. And it's really because we provide that full service, that full comprehensive monitoring, servicing, even the water quality testing before and after our filters. So once we found the technology, we saw that we can implement it really nicely into high rises, and with one single system, purify every single drop of water that's coming in for every single shower, every single tap, even the fountains of the gym for buildings 600 units, 800 units, thousands of units.
And question for you, though, what happens, you talk about you're the barrier when you get into the building, so you're in the pump room, presumably. But what happens if there's crappy pipes within the building, or they've capped off something, so you have like kind of
the dead legs,
a part of the pipe that isn't going anywhere, and so you got the Legionella growing. What do you do in those? Or that's where you're testing, and so you're starting to finally, you can kind of triangulate.
So what we've seen is actually that the UV system will help to reduce even downstream of different types of biofilms. But you mentioned things like dead legs, and you mentioned things like older pipes that may have accumulated a lot of biofilm over its time. If our tests show that those are the significant issues, then we can come to do a flush. It's like a remediation, cleaning of the pipes. This is something that if you do see Legionella, you have to do, right? But if you talk to any of the Legionella remediation companies, they'll tell you 90% of their clients come back to them within 9 months. They have more and more problems. So it's clean for 9 months, and then it reoccurs. And this happens so often, it's ridiculous. In fact, that's where they get this recurring business from, these remediation companies. If instead, after cleaning, you put in a UV system, you basically lock in the clean. You create resilient infrastructure. You allow that building to, the circulatory system of that building to persist without accumulating any further biofilms. And you follow up with the testing. So if there was any leakage of some sort, the bacteria that somehow found its way, or there was some dead legs in certain areas and it's persisting with the problem, the testing is going to lead the solution, right? And so that's where the philosophy around how we're treating water quality in buildings needs to start to change. Because again, it's not just about putting the best technology, it's also servicing, it's also following up with the testing, and then things change. So being able to know what to do and adapt to those changes is extremely important. So you have ASHRAE 188, which is the full guidelines of managing Legionella in buildings. And that one will have all the contingency plans for what to do, where if you do test and see Legionella, this is what you have to do next. And actually, when I've looked at those, I actually have a lot to say about what those contingency plans include, because I think that they're extremely costly, some of those plans, and I don't think they're that effective. So we're in talks right now with people in the ASHRAE side, trying to show them that there's a better way.
Tell people a little bit what ASHRAE is.
Yeah, so ASHRAE manages, I think, most of the building codes, right, across the US and in Canada as well. So I'm really mostly familiar just with what ASHRAE has to say on the water quality side.
But also HVAC, like they do full building audits, so they're pretty key for looking at sustainability measures in a building. So a big building authority, one could say. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, 100%. So so when ASHRAE puts 188, I mean, we're now getting involved in those water management plans for some of our clients, and we're working to redraft some of those water management plans around the fact that they have centralized UV systems, and then we're coming in to even execute some of those processes as part of the water management plan. So you need to have that. Every healthcare system is, by code, has to have a water management plan per ASHRAE. Every nursing home has to have water management plan per ASHRAE. But most senior homes don't. Most affordable housing doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of, I think that even the luxury buildings need to be doing these water management plans. I think that it should be a basic fact of how we manage the water quality in our buildings is through these water management plans. And I'll give you an example. I mean, it's not just in the healthcare settings or in the senior settings or in the nursing home settings. We were out there investigating Legionella death in a luxury building in Florida, in Miami. Gorgeous building, 600 units, luxury beyond luxury. I mean, some of the buildings there in Florida are ultra, ultra luxury. It's ridiculous. So you have people spending tens of millions of dollars on those units. And then a 55-year-old guy dies because of something in his shower. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's not costly for them, for that kind of building, to provide a water management plan and make sure that, if they're selling a luxury product, I mean, how can you call it luxury if you've got bacteria running through your showers?
Yeah. Well, you have to add that layer in now. You have to consider water. It has to be something like air, which you brought up earlier of like, with COVID, that raised alarms for people. And, I need a HEPA filter. I need to understand this. And people in California, I think, are now experts in air filtration and what they need for their homes. But we need to do the same with water. And just like with air, you have to go in and continuously maintain and monitor and have somebody go in and test it. My family were the exact example of the people who didn't change their filter. About 2 years ago, we were like, why is our pressure in our sink so low? It's taking forever to fill like a cup of water. And we realized it's because we had never changed the filter. And so like God knows what was in that. So we're the exact case. And again, I'm in the building industry. But one of the stories that I love that I remember you telling, just talk about a few examples of when you installed the filters and then what happened and kind of the value creation. And I think you already know I want to talk about the Sacramento story of it was
and
affordable
we have a few
housing.
Other examples like that.
But share a few of those.
Sure. So, again, people start the conversation sometimes with us saying, hey, city water, that's fine, right? Because maybe they don't know what kind of risks there are, or maybe they do understand that the pipes in the ground are potentially at risk, but they don't know what kind of risk. And again, when you start the test, you start to see the problems. So as part of a regular service after installation, we do tests every 6 months before and after the system. And what we've seen in a few of our situations, such as the one you're mentioning in Sacramento, that one is Sacramento downtown. Okay, it's right next to the new arena that they just built. It's affordable housing and it's senior housing. So all the residents there, it's about 183 units, senior housing, low income. And we installed the centralized UV water purification system. First of all, the reception was amazing. Okay, we came to present what we did to the community. 60 people came. We didn't have enough chairs for them. And they all wanted to see the system. They all had so many questions. They all were so excited. A lot of them were saying to me like, oh, we have to boil our water before we drink it, right? That's the only way we'll feel comfortable. Or we spend so much on filters and I'm spending $50 a month on my filters or my bottled water or anything like that. So now I feel much more confident, and I felt that the water quality actually improved. The taste improved, the feeling on my skin, on my hair improved. But then we started to follow up with the tests. And what we found was, we did bacterial tests before and after the system, and we saw coming from the city of Sacramento to a downtown apartment, we saw a saturation in terms of the amount of bacteria coming in. So basically the way it's tested is like it's put into a plate, and then the plate is incubated, and you count the amount of colonies that have grown on that plate. But what came out was what's known as a lawn. Basically the whole plate was just growing with bacteria, so you can't even count anymore the individual colonies. So you can't get a number. It's just saturated. And so the saturation point in this case for that experiment was about 2,300 colony forming units, as if you counted 2,300 per mil. But then you saw this sample that came after the UV, and there was less than 0.01. So from more than 2,300 to less than 0.01, that's more than 100,000 times reduction in the bacterial content coming in from the city. So first, the shocking part, that's a huge amount of bacteria coming in from Sacramento water.
And so that's presumably from the pipes, because let's hope they're testing at the...
They're definitely testing at the water treatment plants, and that's not where they're going to find it, but it's because of what's coming through the pipes. The thing is, if I test it again, I might not see that same amount, because it's temporal. It changes with weather. It changes with the rain. It changes with flooding. It changes with snow melt. So sometimes you'll catch it, sometimes you won't. Every time you test it's a snapshot in time, right? But this time we caught it, and we caught a huge amount. And it showed the value of putting in such like this UV, because it reduced it more than 100,000 times, probably close to 1 million times. But our test just couldn't even see above that point. It was saturated by then. So for that property, that was a huge benefit that we provided them. But we've seen the same in cities near Pittsburgh, in New Jersey. We've seen the bacteria coming in from the city in these cases, between like 100 colony forming units to sometimes 500 colony forming units. Again, the 2,300 and above was really, really rare. That was huge. But we've been able to reduce the bacteria that comes in all of these properties. So we've been building these case studies where we show, because we're doing the regular testing, we're able to show what's actually coming in from our cities. And then we're showing the value of providing that UV there.
And so what's the step back when you think of this? Like, clearly there's a problem. It's widespread. It's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Is it the role of the building owner to install this? And it's great because I kind of want you to go a little bit into the economics, but, I know from our experience that the value of putting this in, definitely pencils. But is it the building owner? Is it regulation? Is it pushing for rebates for people to put filters in their multi-family buildings, in their single-family homes, just as you have an energy rebate? Like, how do you address the so what here? What do we do with all this information?
So first of all, there's a lot of information. You're totally right. And it's complicated, right? It's science. What's coming in our water, it's chemistry, it's biology, it's physics. And then you have to talk about the built environment as well. So there's construction, MEP, you have to consider all of that. Water quality management is a difficult and growing science. It's something that's not written for us easily inside of a textbook that we can all learn and follow from. And I think that's one of the first things that we're dispelling, I think, as a society, and we're just part of, like, what we're doing at Clear is just part of that. But the education around it is growing, and it's growing inevitably because any person could just start to test. So now people start to see what's actually happening. And now we're starting to realize that, hey, this is really complex. What is a PFAS? What are the different types of heavy metals? What's a strontium? What does strontium do to my body?
Oh, I tested all, I use my TAP score, and I'm sitting in my bed. I took the whole thing. I copy and pasted into ChatGPT. I'm like, what is this? What's that?
And you're trying to learn, right? It's like, okay, what's a strontium?
Yeah, the results were alarming.
And what can it do to my body, right? What's a disinfection byproduct? What can that do to my body? What can it do in acute cases? What can it do in after I drink it for 30 years? The truth is that even that, we don't know. Mm-hmm. The healthcare aspect of it, each one of these different contaminants, to understand the immediate, short-term, medium-term, long-term, chronic effects of each one of those contaminants, there's a lot of work to do. So as a society, we're really not there to really understand how it's even affecting our health, even if we find something in our water. So just the knowledge around all of this is just changing, and it's growing. And I'm going to sidestep to one example. Going back to bacteria, there's something called H. pylori. And H. pylori, when it infects you, it can be a lifelong infection. 23% of Ontario adults that have gastrointestinal symptoms, they have H. pylori. My sister is infected with H. pylori, and she had 3 years of gastrointestinal problems. No doctor could tell her what was the problem until they finally tested for it and they found it. Wasn't until like 2015 that we understood that H. pylori is the #1 cause of gastric cancer worldwide. Wasn't until 2019 that we understood that H. pylori is most like H. pylori infections are most likely coming from our domestic taps. So it took us until 2019 to understand that the #1 cause of gastric cancer is coming from our taps. So it just shows you how much there is left to learn and how much we're constantly learning about this. And so that's what I learned when I was doing all the research. I learned, wow, there's a lot left to be desired. There's a lot more information that we're still building. I mean, we're still learning the health effects. We're still learning what's in our water and how to manage it. So it requires, let's go back to your initial question, which is like, whose responsibility is it? And I honestly think that in order to achieve what we all want, right, which is a very basic ask from our society, right? We want clean, safe water that doesn't hurt us, and everybody should have access to that, and not just in the luxury apartments. I mean, it's not just the penthouse in Miami. It should also be the senior housing in Sacramento, and to be honest, it should also be in the remote communities as well. In Canada, we have huge issues with water quality being provided to Aboriginal communities, and it's an embarrassment, to be honest. As a first world developed country like Canada, it's an embarrassment to have communities that for thousands of days are on a boil water advisory. The truth is, what we should all want, what we should all demand, is we should demand safe, clean water to everybody. And now the question is, how do we do it? And how we do it is by taking responsibility. And the truth is that we can all look at the government and be like, hey, they need to basically fix this problem for us. But there's some problems that even if the government wanted to, it's not really within their purview to do. We have to separate the responsibilities very cleanly. But I think that what it means is that it's the responsibility of all levels of society to help us to get to that goal, starting from the municipalities, going to the building owners, and then also the final consumers need to understand every time they have a filter in their home. What is it? What is that filter? When do they have to change it?
Well, and if you own your own home, you are the building owner in that case too. So you have even double the responsibility of taking action.
And they're also the responsibility of the companies that come to install, right? One of the issues that I've seen is a lot of these older filter companies, they say whatever they want to say, right? They put whatever they want to put, but nobody's following up with the testing. Nobody's making sure that it stays good. I saw somebody the other day give a quote to a consumer, and they said in the quote, "You don't have to service this for 20 years." And I know that's wrong. There's no filter out there that for 20 years won't start to accumulate issues. But they'll say it because it helps them to make a sale. And that's part of what I've seen a lot in the filter industry that I really don't like, because they're basically salespeople, they're marketers. They're not people that are actually trying to improve the water quality.
Yeah. Well, this gets to, I mean, I have two follow-on questions, but I think the one that people listening and watching most want to know is, what kind of filter should I be getting? What should I do? Like I said, I was on the way over here, I had an Instagram post pop up that was like, these are the reasons why you shouldn't like these filters and all their issues. And it's all the filters you've seen and heard and are advertised and are all, on social media. So if you're listening or watching, what should you be thinking and doing?
So the truth is that there's no one filter that's going to solve all the problems. And you shouldn't want to purchase filters that are doing things you don't need. So at the end of the day, and this is where it becomes more complicated and less scalable as a business, it's everyone has a specific water coming in through their taps, right? And unless they know exactly what are the issues coming there, I can't tell them what is the best solution for them. I'll give you an example. I'm here now in New York. I'm going to be traveling to Long Island. Long Island has had this issue related to industrial activities that was happening on Long Island probably many, many years ago. But there were industrial solvents that made its way into the groundwater in Long Island. And you mentioned the subsidies. So the government in a couple of those counties have actually now started to subsidize individual homeowners to come and provide filter solutions for those kinds of solvents. So these are chemicals, and actually the major one they're looking at is called 1,4-dioxane. So 1,4-dioxane is a carcinogen, and there is quite a significant amount of it in certain areas on Long Island. And it took a citizen effort to push the government to actually provide those subsidies and to help those homeowners start to be able to afford to put in the solutions to 1,4-dioxane, which is those homeowners are not responsible for the 1,4-dioxane.
And would a normal filter off the shelf have filtered for that kind of solvent?
Every filter is different. Filters are made of different materials. They're meant to do different things.
So you just would have no idea. As a layperson, you would have no idea.
So what I would do as somebody that's coming from the water technology side is I'll turn to my media manufacturer and I'd say, hey, I need to deal with 1,4-dioxane. This person's house has 1,4-dioxane and maybe a couple other metals, and that's all I want to deal with. Okay, in this case, I don't need to deal with the PFAS. I don't need to deal with arsenic. So instead of selling 8 different types of media and give you a big tank and sell it to you for triple the price while you're just trying to solve the 1,4-dioxane, I'd say to you, hey, this is the exact media that's going to do the best to remove the 1,4-dioxane. I can put it in a smaller tank, provide just that, and solve the specific problem you're dealing with. So customized solutions is really what is required. You need to start with the testing and let the testing lead the solution. Again, a lot of the filter companies exist these days. They have one product, 2 products.
But isn't there a general baseline that people want? Like, doesn't everyone want to filter out arsenic and?
Yeah, but if you don't have arsenic, and in order to filter out arsenic, it's going to cost 2 times more, then it's not going to make sense.
So you want to really match it.
It's about matching it so that you don't have to pay for things that are not solving your problems, and you're making sure you're paying for things that are solving your problems, right? You want the solution to your problems and nothing else, right? And because there are so many possible problems, there's nobody should say, hey, I've got the perfect filter that's going to work for every single case. If you're a ranch in Oklahoma, you're going to want something totally different compared to a house in West Palm Beach, which is going to want something totally different than what's happening in Long Island. So it's about starting with the testing and letting the testing lead to the solution. However, once you're in an area that's dealing with a very specific problem, and you find solutions for that area, that's then the solution that you can start to put around in that neighborhood. So once we provide a case study to show that we're really effective, cost effective, and performance based to remove the 1,4-dioxane in the water in Long Island, that's a product I would start to sell to the people in Long Island. And I would show them the results of what I've been able to do before. So it requires like having a scientists that actually understand the chemistry, understand the problems, and have the ability to produce the solutions.
And so what kind of testing should people do? Should they go on My Tap Score and do the city water test? I mean, there are a lot of tests, and they're not cheap. Like they're $600, or they're $1,000, or they're $300. Yeah. I did a bunch just because this is what I've been focused on, but it's not cheap to do.
And it depends what you want to test, right? So the PFAS test that you did in your home, that's a more expensive one, right? But the comprehensive test that you can do, which will give you a list of some of the major metals and give you a list of, tell you the hardness of the water and tell you a few different factors of your water. It's a pretty comprehensive test. You can get it for, I think, less than $200.
And do you know which one that's called? I can follow.
So they have the essentials.
Yeah.
And they have the essentials for city. They have the essentials for well water. Mm-hmm. And then they have the comprehensive, then they have the ultimate, right? And each one will do a different set of contaminants. Now, and this is all Tap Score, which I highly recommend. I think Tap Score is an incredible solution for people. It's very easy for consumers to do. You put you get a box, it gives you instructions, you fill up the vial with the water, you put it back in the box, you send it to them, and it's done.
It's very consumer friendly.
Very consumer friendly, right? And then you get a really nice dashboard, and it keeps track of all the results you've tested for before. And overall, I mean, for a couple $100, you can get a benchmark of what's coming in through your water. And that, I think, is something that is just going to get cheaper over time. And it's just going to be a larger and larger list that we can start to get. So now it's only now becoming feasible for consumers to do that kind of testing for themselves. People like you who care about their water, not just the water, but the whole health of their environment, are already ahead of that, are already doing those types of tests. Soon enough, as that cost continues to go down, as that list of contaminants continue to increase, we're going to see more and more consumers out there testing, not just testing their water, but testing their products. I've seen people buying shower heads, testing the shower heads, and being very disappointed in
Well, I'm sure
results.
that's happening. I'm sure it's on Reddits and Facebook pages.
It's happening.
You're starting to see that,
which is where I think this market is shifting to. From what I've seen, that's been working so far, like people just buying for Brita filters and just thinking that's enough, not really understanding what it's really doing, to where we're going today, which is, I believe we're shifting towards a demand of, hey, I just need something that I think is going to improve my water, to, no, I need you to prove to me that my water is what it's supposed to be, what I want it to be. So I call it the performance-based market. It's a market of people who are much more educated about what's in their water, and it's on the back of the fact that they can more easily test for cheaper. They can do more samples, see more things. As the transparency of what's in our water starts to increase, which is inevitable, then the burden to treat the water and to actually perform in your treatment is going to increase. And that is a burden that's going to be on property managers, because if a person in their condo starts to test and they see lead, who are they calling? They're calling the property manager. Now, what is the property manager going to do about it? So it's going to start to be where it's going to be an increased burden to keep the building healthier, because people in their homes can start to do their own tests. And that's what I saw back in 2021 when I started to do my research, and I wrote this little white paper. And in the end of the white paper, I just basically concluded, I mean, those tests are going to be so much easier, so much cheaper. Anybody's going to be able to do it. Our eyes on what's in our water, it's just going to become more transparent, and therefore the burden is going to increase, and people are going to need testing and then treatment, and then the test to prove that the treatment's worked.
So I guess right now one could do the test, maybe do a little research of issues in their area. So maybe they could, learn, I live in this part of Long Island, there's issues with this, it's been historic. So you could do the little bit of extra credit there. And then, maybe if they're listening to this, they write you an email or they go on your website. Or is their next move to do a little bit of research and then figure out, I guess, the right medium for the right issue in their water? All of that, though, is an incredible amount of effort for somebody.
Exactly. Which is why I think there's a big gap for scientifically driven water technology companies. That's what we're trying to be. That's what we're trying to provide to this market. And that's why there's a lot of our clients who have gone through 3 different filter companies, tested after each one, has been disappointed. And now they're talking to us. And we're coming in, doing the testing, providing customized solutions to their specific problems, and then doing the full monitoring and servicing and follow-up testing after that. We're here to help you to manage your water quality so that you don't have to be there to think about all, hey, there's arsenic, there's lead, there's PFAS. What are the risks with each? What are my solutions for each one of them? How do I know that my solutions continue to work? How do I take care of my solutions afterwards? There's a lot to it. Now the idea is that you can go and bring a company like Clear, who's got a team of scientists and engineers, water technologists, who are basically going to do all of that work for you. And really all you want to see at the end of the day is a good test.
Talk to me about the economics. So what is, say you have a 300 unit apartment building, what does it look like to install your system? What does that look like, the cost for the residents? Like, walk through that.
Yeah.
So again, if someone's hearing this and saying, oh, wow, this is an interesting system, I want to bring it to my building. But what is the cost? So
we basically have different size models for different size buildings, but the economics gets better. And this is part of the benefit of providing the UV there, as opposed to those other filters, is that the economics per unit gets better for larger buildings, whereas it gets much worse for an RO system, for instance. Yeah. Meaning that in some cases, like in Florida, for instance, we had these 2 large towers. They shared a single water main. Overall, it was like 1,500 units total. So we were able to provide at between $3 to $4 per unit per month. And that was everything. That's equipment, that's installation, monitoring, services, water quality testing, absolutely everything and some. And we were talking about the cost of maybe like 2 or 3 bottles of water a month for each unit. I mean, on average, the average American household is spending $100 a month on either water bottles or their filters. $100 a month. So
yeah, I think people after listening to this are going to, unfortunately, buy bottled water.
Yes. And
which please don't.
Which again, I mean, look, the truth is when I travel, that's all I have, right? I wish I had some form of filtered water that I could drink and I didn't have to take it from the bottles, right? In my own home, I won't drink the bottled water. But if that's all I had, I would prefer that over the tap water. In many cases, especially in a city I don't really know, or in a building I'm not familiar with. But the point is that you're taking a cost for an average household of $100 per month, and you can reduce that to, in some cases, $15, $10, or even $5. So the value, the economic value, is achieved directly at the end consumer. The problem is that for a condo building or a multifamily, the end consumer is not the one that's making a decision about what's going in through the pump room. And so when you provide it to a multifamily owner, they may not see how they're going to achieve that economic benefit for themselves. The ROI is achieved to the consumer, who's now getting improved water quality without having to purchase the bottled waters, without having to purchase other filters. But how do you get that back to the multifamily owner itself? So maybe they can decide to charge increased in rent, common fees. We make the point that it's going to help you to sell units, reduce static vacancies. So there's other aspects of improving the ROI, but the truth is there's a significant value provided to the final end consumer. Mm-hmm. And bringing that back may even require certain subsidies. It may even require other aspects. So in affordable housing, for instance, we've been able to achieve certain types of subsidies that go back to the ownership. And that allows us to provide that value to the final end consumer while making it incentivized for the property owner themselves to go through with that.
And just pulling on that, when you've provided your system to affordable housing, the reason you're able to see that improvement is because you literally have shown value. Yeah. You've created that value. So talk a little bit about just that mechanics of that you actually were able to substantiate that.
Substantiate the value in terms of what we did to the water, or the economic value?
Yeah.
Or
the economic value.
In the economic value, it's they understand that in the specific portfolios that we work with, they want to be out there pushing the message that they're providing the best possible low-income housing, affordable housing. They acquire buildings and they'll go looking at a 20-year horizon. So first of all, they even see the benefits of improving water quality on the plumbing system. The preventative maintenance on the plumbing is actually a major factor. So when you're looking at a 20-year horizon to that investment, then anything that can increase the longevity of the building's plumbing is going to create a net benefit economically. So one, the preventative maintenance. But two, it's to be able to go out and say, hey, our affordable housing is good affordable housing, right? Just because you're low income doesn't mean you need to live in the worst possible conditions. We're here changing the script, and here's one of the ways that we're doing it. By improving the health aspects of our buildings and of our environments. So they also have invested in air purifiers in certain locations, and the water purification system is a big one. And we've seen that as well with the developers we work with and the luxury developers, because for them, they want to say, hey, when you live in one of our buildings developed by us, you know that you're going to get the best water quality in the city compared to any other units. It helps them to sell. It helps them to market. It helps them to differentiate the brand.
And I think it's going to become increasingly important too. I think
the demand for this is growing like crazy.
From people to live in places that are healthy for them, I think is only going to continue to increase, especially with water.
Yeah.
I think the more people hear about, I mean, obviously the bacterial elements, but I think this big fear of the unknown with forever chemicals, I think is really embedding in people's minds. And so I do think that it's more and more important. So this has been wonderful. What else would you want to share? What else would be a closing, or what have we missed?
Well, you know what? We're really focused on trying to do sort of grassroots up, but we're focused on not just the affordable housing in the U.S. and the luxury developers as well. We've also been doing a lot of sort of humanitarian nonprofit work as well. So we did an incredible project out in Kenya that I'm very proud of. It's a school of about 363 kids that every single day they'd have to schlep 2 hours to the water hole to collect water. They'd come back with boxes of water on their head, 300 kids every single day. And the water they collected was bad. Yeah. In fact, a lot of those kids were getting the same exact parasite that I had contracted, the Entamoeba histolytica, which is causing the dysentery. That's unfortunately the cause of a lot of death in those communities. So what we did is we deployed a specific UV technology. It's a UV LED technology, which is very, very new. It's a Canadian technology that we deployed. The first time it was deployed in that kind of application. And we had built there with the help of, we basically worked with a lab out in the University of British Columbia to do this. And that lab had built tanks that were collecting the rainwater from the roof of the school. That rainwater was full of bacteria. But then we ran it through this UV LED technology, also developed at the University of British Columbia. And then we were proving that we were cleaning the water. We removed all the bacteria from that water. So now we have right there outside of their classrooms 8 different distribution points, taps, that they can go and drink clean, fresh water from, saving them between 2 to 4 hours a day each person.
That's great.
I remember doing like a video chat, because I wasn't able to travel out there, but I was doing a video chat, and I spoke with the principal, who was so thankful, was so grateful. I spoke with the teachers there, the same, the parents, the same, and then they turned the camera around, and there's 360 kids all yelling and smiling and, waving. And I remember that being like the most meaningful moment of my life.
That's amazing.
In that exact moment. So I say this as well to my colleagues. I mean, we are so lucky that we get to make money and build a business around providing improved water quality, because there's nothing controversial about that. What we're doing is really just helping people.
Yeah.
And so I'm very proud of all the work that we do. We actually just counted, in the past year or so, we provided more than 3,000 families with improved water quality, and mostly in affordable housing. Those are the numbers that really matter to me at the end.
And it's people like you. I think it's really fascinating. A lot of folks I've had on so far, people I've engaged with, have come into this space, have had a career that's maybe somewhat related, but have had some incident with their health. So I had the CEO of Mold Co. on a few weeks ago, and she had a tremendous issue with mold. And that spurred her to become a founder and CEO. And you have you with the water situation, that spurs you. And so I think with all of this, it's this silver lining of a horrible situation, but then you've been able to take it and run with it and open the aperture to something that is right in front of all of us, these big issues with the places we live, and then work to improve it. And then the other thread that we got out of this, it's also been a continuous theme, is this idea that, there isn't always the easy solution. And I think that's really hard for people. And you can bury your head in the sand because there's so much complexity. Like, I've gotten to know this amazing project at the University of Louisville where they did the first clinical trial ever of a tree and looking at, the benefit of trees for cardiovascular health. And in talking to the researchers, I asked a similar question. Well, can you just get any air filter, or can you just plant any tree? And it's like, no, you can't actually. Yeah. And they're like, well, these trees were better in this place and that tree is better here. And, you couldn't just take the tree that worked in Louisville and then see if it works in New York City. You'd have to look at the weather patterns and the actual, issues with air pollution here. And with that study, they modeled the fluid dynamics of wind off the highway so they could get the air pollution. It's the same level of precision that you have. And I think the point is, don't bury your head in the sand. I do think a clean filter, that when you clean, is probably better than no filter. A tree is probably better than no tree. But I think what's exciting is the testing. You can test as your own person. You can test your air quality, your water quality. You can test for mold. You can do the research. Yes, it takes time, but there are enough crazy people online and people on Reddit and Instagram, and you can start doing the research. And the more we test, the more we research, and the more this becomes a big theme, I think it is hopeful and is a proactive, exciting space. So, I don't think we need to overwhelm ourselves with the complexity, but know that there are things you as a citizen science, you and me, and you being the expert, can do.
I think when it comes to our health, the least we should expect from ourselves is to try our best, right? I mean, health is complicated, biology is complicated, everything is difficult and complicated. But there is something to be said about not neglecting problems that we know, and especially when there's solutions that we know, and just trying our best to make sure that, and you'll see this with parents, right? Once they have a kid in their house, their standards go way up. And now we see that in our market research as well. They're willing to pay for every child. They're willing to pay another $5 per month.
I didn't get a filter until I had a child.
Exactly. Once you start to see your kids sleeping in their room and you're asking yourself now questions about, okay, what are they breathing? What are they drinking? And you just want to know that you're doing the best that you could for them. And so I think that's really where we are. Everything's hard, everything's complicated. And the truth is the scientists still don't really know all the risks and what they're going to do to you. And those studies are still being done. But
they will continue.
And they will continue. But it's about just doing your best, doing as much research as you can, trying to understand on the more fundamental aspects of our environmental health, our air, our water, what we can do to improve that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I loved it.
This is fascinating, and more to come, and I'm sure there'll be more conversations. So thank you.
Amazing, Carrie. Thank you so much.